My name is Talia Marsh. I'm 34, and I'm a licensed architect, which means that when I put my professional stamp on a drawing, I'm making a legal promise to a client, to an inspector, to anyone who ever sets foot inside that building, that what's behind the walls is exactly as safe as it looks. So when I opened a glossy sale prospectus for my family's historic inn 3 days before its grand reopening and found my own name printed under the words Design Consultation by Talia Marsh, AIA, I already knew exactly what question I was about to ask a county permitting office. What I didn't know yet was what was actually holding up the second-floor guest wing, or how many people were about to be standing under it when I found out. Welcome back to her final chapter, where every story starts with silence and ends with power. If you've ever had your name used for something you never agreed to, this one's for you. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. I grew up in the Hartwell Inn, a 9-room stone and timber property my grandfather Everett built by hand in 1961 on a bluff overlooking the Hudson, the kind of building where every joint and beam has a story if you know how to read it. My grandfather taught me that reading before he taught me much of anything else, running my fingers along a hand-hewn joist at 8 years old while he explained load paths the way other grandfathers explained baseball. I became an architect almost by inevitability, licensed at 27, specializing now in historic renovation and structural compliance for buildings exactly like the one I grew up in. My quirk, if you want to call it that, is that I still carry a small brass plumb bob in my bag on every site visit, an old-fashioned tool nobody actually needs anymore with laser levels available, the same one my grandfather used to check whether a wall was true. My associates tease me about it constantly. I've never once, in 7 years of practice, found it wrong. What most people don't understand about my job is that the stamp itself, the physical seal I press onto a drawing, isn't decoration. It's a legal instrument. When I certify a structure as sound, I'm personally, professionally, and financially liable if it isn't, for the rest of my career. I've walked away from paying clients who wanted me to sign off on shortcuts I couldn't defend to an inspector, because the stamp only means something if it means the same thing every single time. My family has run the Hartwell Inn for 3 generations, my parents taking it over from my grandfather, my older sister Renee and her husband Doug managing day-to-day operations for the last 6 years. I left the family business at 22 to pursue architecture formally, a decision my father called at the time, walking away from what actually matters. And I've spent the 12 years since watching my family treat my career the way you'd treat a hobby someone eventually needs to grow out of. Here's the part I don't say out loud very often. Despite everything, some quiet, stubborn part of me still measures my own worth against that building. I learned to read blueprints on my grandfather's kitchen table. No degree, no license, no reputation I've built since has ever quite replaced the feeling of belonging to that specific stretch of stone and timber on the bluff. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in April, forwarded from Renee with the subject line, Grand Reopening, You're Invited. The Hartwell Inn had been closed for renovation for 8 months, and the attached press release described a full restoration ahead of a sale to a boutique hospitality group, closing scheduled for the following Monday. We'd love to have you there, Tal, Renee had written underneath. Don't overthink it. Just come celebrate with us. It's been such a big undertaking. Don't overthink it. She'd used that exact phrase on me a dozen times over the years, always in the same context. Whenever I'd raised a concern about the inn's maintenance, its wiring, the sagging beam in the east guest wing I'd flagged as a teenager, and again as a licensed architect 8 years ago. Don't overthink it, Talia. Dad's got it handled. I clicked through the attached prospectus, expecting photographs, maybe a floor plan. On page 4, beneath a rendering of the fully restored second-floor guest wing, sat a line of small italicized text. Design Consultation by Talia Marsh, AIA, License Number NY 0847213. My license number, my exact credential. Attached to a renovation I had never once reviewed, on a building where I'd spent 8 years, quietly worried about the same structural questions nobody in my family had ever wanted to hear. I sat very still at my desk for almost a full minute, the way you sit still when your body understands something before your mind has caught up to it. Then I picked up my phone and called the Ulster County Building Department, my hands steadier than I expected. To understand why that email hit as hard as it did, you have to go back 8 years, to the summer I found the sagging beam. I was 26, freshly licensed, home for a long weekend, and I'd walked the inn's second-floor hallway the way I walk every building now, out of professional habit rather than nostalgia. In the east guest wing, above room 7, I noticed a deflection in the ceiling line that shouldn't have been there, a beam bearing more load than it had been sized for, likely from a bathroom addition my father had approved decades earlier without a full structural review. I measured it myself, photographed it, and brought my father a 2-page memo, calm and factual, the way I write everything, recommending a licensed structural engineer inspect the wing before another season of guests slept beneath it. My father read half a page before setting it down. "Talia, this building has stood for 50 years. I think I know it better than a memo you wrote in an afternoon." My mother, gentler but no less final, added, "You've always been the cautious one. That's a good quality in your own work. This is our business, honey. Don't overthink it." I didn't push further, not then. I told myself the deflection was minor, that my father, who'd lived in that building his whole life, likely had instincts I couldn't fully second-guess from a weekend visit. 18 months later, during a January storm, the ceiling in room 7 partially gave way while a guest slept in the room below, sending debris and a section of subfloor down onto an empty bed, thankfully unoccupied at the exact moment it happened. Nobody was hurt. My family settled a modest claim with their insurer, quietly, and never once mentioned my memo to the adjuster, or to me. I want to be fair to my father, in the way I've learned to be fair to clients who make expensive mistakes out of fear rather than malice. He'd inherited a building he loved fiercely and understood emotionally rather than structurally, and admitting a flaw in it felt, to him, like admitting a flaw in his own inheritance. I understand that now. I didn't understand it then, sitting in my apartment reading a group text about the storm damage that never once used the word I'd used in my memo 18 months earlier: deflection. I want to be honest about something. Despite that whole ordeal, some part of me never stopped hoping my family would eventually ask me back into that building the right way, not as the daughter who left, not as the cautious one, but as the architect who actually understood what it took to keep it standing. That hope is most of the reason I opened the email about the reopening at all, instead of deleting it the moment I saw Renee's name. My business partner Kwame has watched 8 years of this exact pattern from a professional distance, and he didn't hesitate when I showed him the prospectus. "Talia, your license number is on a legal marketing document for a renovation you've never seen. Before you do anything else, you need to know what's actually behind those walls, because right now, your name is attached to whatever it is." He wasn't wrong, and I called the county building department anyway before doing anything more drastic, because grief and old hope wear the same clothes sometimes, and some quiet, unfinished part of me still wanted to walk into that reopening and find a building my family had actually done right, finally, without me having to be the one who insisted on it. The clerk who answered confirmed within minutes that no structural permit had been filed for the Hartwell Inn in the past 11 months. A general renovation permit existed for cosmetic work, flooring, fixtures, paint, but nothing covering the load-bearing modifications the prospectus photos clearly showed in the second-floor guest wing, the exact wing above room 7. I drove up to the inn 2 days before the reopening, telling Renee I wanted to see the renovation in person before the crowds arrived. What I expected was a quiet walkthrough with my sister. What I found, pulling into the gravel lot, was a catering truck, a local news van, and roughly 40 people already moving through the property for what Renee's text had called just a small family celebration. I found the renovation itself before I found my family, walking the ground floor alone while catering staff set up. The lobby had been transformed: new hand-scraped hardwood, a restored stone fireplace, the kind of restoration that photographs beautifully and costs a fraction of what it looks like it costs, because I recognized the flooring immediately as a high-end vinyl composite designed to mimic reclaimed oak, laid directly over what I suspected, correctly, was the original subfloor that should have been inspected before anything went on top of it. Upstairs, in the east guest wing, above room 7, fresh drywall and a new coat of warm cream paint covered the exact spot where I'd photographed a structural deflection 8 years earlier. I ran my hand along the ceiling line out of pure habit and felt it immediately. The faint, familiar unevenness, slightly worse now than I remembered, hidden under paint instead of fixed underneath it. The small comments started the moment my family found me upstairs. My father, walking the hallway with a wine glass and a proud, expansive energy I hadn't seen from him in years, clapped my shoulder and said, "See, Talia, 50 years old and still standing. Sometimes buildings just need a little faith instead of a memo." Renee's husband, Doug, who'd managed the renovation personally, added, breezy and dismissive, "We didn't want to slow things down with a bunch of permits and inspections. Buyers want speed, not paperwork." My mother, passing with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, said warmly, "Your name looked so professional on the prospectus, honey. We thought you'd be thrilled." I had not been consulted about the prospectus. I had not seen a single drawing. I said nothing yet. I stepped into the small office off the lobby, the same room where my grandfather used to do the books, and pulled up the county permit records on my laptop, cross-referencing the dates against Doug's renovation timeline. The gap was exactly what I'd suspected. Cosmetic permit, filed and approved in October. A load-bearing wall removed between rooms 6 and 7 the following month, per the before and after photos in the prospectus itself, with no structural permit, no engineer's stamp, no inspection on record at all. Renee found me there 20 minutes later, her expression shifting from bright hostess to something more guarded once she saw my screen. "Talia, what are you doing? The buyers are arriving in an hour." "Did you know Doug removed a load-bearing wall without a permit?" I asked. Quiet, level, the same tone I use walking a nervous client through a bad inspection report. Renee's face did the thing it does when she's already decided how a conversation is going to end before it begins. "Talia, don't overthink it. It's fine. Doug's done renovations for years." The second delivery, aimed directly at me now, in a room I'd once done homework in as a child. I didn't confront Doug immediately. I walked back out into the lobby, now filling with guests, a local reporter setting up a small camera near the fireplace, and found my father near the entrance, greeting the boutique hospitality group's lead buyer, a composed woman in her 50s named Colette Rousseau, who'd flown in from Boston that morning specifically for this closing. My father saw me and, with the easy confidence of a man who'd clearly rehearsed this exact introduction, pulled me toward Colette. "Colette, this is my daughter Talia, the architect I mentioned. She consulted on the renovation, actually did some of the original planning work years ago." He said it warmly, publicly, in front of the reporter's camera, and I understood, standing there, that I was about to become the credential that closed this sale on Monday, whether I agreed to it or not. "Actually," I said, and let the words sit for a moment in the space my father's smile had opened, "I'd like to correct that for the record, before this goes any further." Colette's expression shifted from polite welcome to careful attention almost instantly, the particular alertness of someone whose entire job depends on reading a room correctly. "I'm sorry. Is there an issue?" "There is," I said. "My name and license number appear in your sale prospectus without my knowledge or consent, attached to structural work I never reviewed. I checked the county building department 2 days ago. There's no structural permit on file for the load-bearing wall removed in the east guest wing. I can show you the exact photo in your own prospectus where it's clearly documented." My father's smile went rigid. "Talia, don't do this here. Don't overthink it. We can talk about the paperwork later." Third delivery, in front of Colette, the reporter, and roughly 40 guests, now quietly aware that something had shifted in the room. I let the silence sit, 1 second, 3, 5 full seconds, while Colette looked between my father and me, doing the exact calculation I'd have done in her position. Then I said, "Quiet, level. I don't sign my name to unsafe work. I never did." Doug appeared beside my father, his face flushed. "This is ridiculous. We had contractors on this, real contractors. It's completely safe." "Then you won't mind," I said, pulling out my phone. "If I call the county building inspector right now and ask them to confirm that. I have their direct line saved from 2 days ago." I dialed on speaker, in front of the room, watching my father's face lose color in real time as the line connected. The inspector, a calm, unhurried man named Frank Delgado, confirmed within 30 seconds exactly what I'd already found. No structural permit, no engineer sign-off, and upon hearing the address and the words "load-bearing wall," a flat, professional statement that halted the room entirely. "That property needs an immediate structural review before any occupancy continues. I'll need to schedule an inspection this week." Doug tried a second time, louder now, gesturing at the fresh drywall around us like the paint itself was evidence of safety. "This is a 50-year-old building. It's been standing for decades. One unfiled form doesn't mean—" Colette cut him off, calm and final, closing her portfolio with a small, decisive click. "It means my firm's insurer won't touch this property until that review is complete, and it means the closing scheduled for Monday isn't happening on that timeline. I need to make some calls." My father tried a third time, softer, almost pleading, the mask fully down now. "Talia, please, We've put everything into this. Colette, she's exaggerating. Buildings settle. It's normal. Colette was already walking toward the door, phone to her ear, the reporter quietly lowering his camera, sensing correctly that the story he'd come to cover had just become a very different one. The sale did not close that Monday. I want to be honest that I didn't feel triumphant watching it unravel in that lobby, in front of 40 guests and a local reporter who ran a modest, factual piece the following week under the headline, Historic In-Sale Delayed Over Structural Concerns. What I felt, mostly, was tired and a little sad, watching my father's face as Colette's car pulled out of the gravel lot. Frank Delgado's team completed the structural review within the week, confirming the load-bearing wall removal had, in fact, compromised the second-floor framing, requiring roughly $14,000 in corrective engineering and construction before the building could safely reopen to guests. My father and Doug covered the cost themselves, out of the sale proceeds they'd been counting on, a hard, expensive lesson that no memo 8 years earlier had ever managed to teach them for free. I did not press further consequences against my family, though Kwame reminded me, more than once, that I'd have had every right to report the unauthorized use of my license to the state board, a violation that carries real professional penalties. What I did instead was offer, formally and in writing, to serve as the inn's architect of record for the repair, on the condition that every future decision about that building went through a permit process, no exceptions, no more faith instead of paperwork. My father agreed quietly, without much argument left in him. The quieter thing happened 3 weeks later, clearing out the old office where my grandfather used to keep the books, when I found, tucked behind a filing cabinet, a set of his original 1961 hand-drawn blueprints, annotated in the margins with small, careful notes about load calculations he'd worked out himself before computers made the math easy. Folded inside them was a short letter, addressed to no one in particular, dated the year before he died. A building only lasts as long as someone's willing to tell the truth about what's holding it up. I hope whoever inherits this place remembers that longer than they remember the view. What I learned, standing in a lobby where my own family tried to close a sale on the strength of my name without ever asking whether I'd give it, is that you can renovate a building's surface in 8 months. You cannot renovate the truth of what's actually underneath it, no matter how good the paint looks in a listing photo. Some things only stay standing because somebody was willing to say, out loud, exactly what needed fixing before it was too late to matter. That's my story. If it meant something to you, drop a comment and tell me. I read every one. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe to her final chapter, because there's another one waiting for you next week.